Okay, welcome everybody. We'll do introductions a bit later, but first of all I'll do the housekeeping. A fire practice is not expected. If the alarm sounds, please can all present leave the building as quickly as possible by way of the nearest exit. Designated assembly point is in the public square in front of CAS, beyond the fountain, away from the civic office. If there's anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. No roll call will be undertaken. Thank you. Can I ask everybody to ensure your mobile phone is on silent? Filming of the meeting is audio-visually recorded and will be available to view on the Council's website and YouTube channel. Can I ask all those present to use their microphone? This makes sure the audio is captured and we don't have any blank spaces. Any members of the public entering the council chamber are accepting that their images will be retained and broadcast by the council. So if there are any members of the public in attendance, and I believe there is somebody today, if you're actually intending to record or film any of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting. If you are visually recording, you're requested to focus only on recording. Okay, shall we just do some introductions? And I'll start with Rebecca right at the end. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rebecca Wall. I'm the Service Director for Children's Social Care.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Andy Hood, the Strategic Lead for Practice Improvement in Children's and the Head of the Youth Offending Service.
Morning, I'm Helen Jones. I'm the Service Manager for the Youth Justice Service.
Good morning, I'm David Smith. I'm the Licensing Officer at Doncaster Council.
Morning, I'm Kelly Hopkins. I'm the Service Director for Environment.
Councillor Jane Kidd, Vice Chair of this committee.
Caroline Martin, Senior Governance Officer, supporting this meeting today.
John Reid, Councillor for Mexborough and one of the chairs on the 4 panels.
Councillor Rebecca Booth, Councillor of Bentley Ward.
Morning, Dave Knight, Councillor for Thornham Moor Ends.
Steve Cox, Finley Ward.
Georgina Lightfoot, Unison Convener.
Thank you very much, everybody. Do we have apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillor Reid and Councillor Cobby.
And I understand that Councillor Jackson's not here at the moment, but he may be a bit delayed.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Need to consider the extent, if any, to which the public and press are to be excluded from the meeting, and there are no such issues on the agenda. Does anybody have a declaration of interest? Okay, thank you very much. So we do have space for a public statement, and there is a member of the public in today waiting to wish us a short statement. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and make your statement, please.
Hi, I'm Steve Merriman, a retired accountant, long retired. I have an interest in reserves, use of reserves or otherwise in local authorities. I gave a question to Council last week, and this is related to it in a sense. So it's about the budget setting that you'll consider later this year, around Christmas and New Year, for the 2026-27 financial year. So as usual, there'll be a climate of continual underfunding of local government by central government. Resources will fall well short of service need, not just in Doncaster, but in all authorities. One way of constructively addressing budget pressures is for local authorities to review their level of reserves. Now, the last published accounts for Doncaster, 23-24, that's year ending 31st of March 24, shows 200 million in usable reserves. It also shows 964 million in unusable reserves. They're to do with revaluation of assets, so we forget those. I'm just talking about the 200 million of usable reserves. So I was thinking that a key role of Overview and Scrutiny Committee could be to consider each reserve that's been set up over the years, to sort of look into when they were set up, what movements have gone in and out since they were set up, why were they set up, i.e. for what purpose, and whether their purpose still exists. Now, the other day in Council, there was a report about the fourth quarter of last financial year, which picked up some reserves where the original purpose is no longer valid. So they use some of those funds to balance the accounts at the year end, which is good practice. Final point, reserves are not a magic money tree, although some people think they are. But I can say that during 35 years in local government finance, I've found a low level of knowledge and understanding about council's reserves. So I'm just offering it up as for possible inclusion in your work plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the statement, and we certainly consider it. We'll take it to the chair when she's back. Thank you very much for that. So we need to move on to agenda item 5, which is the Youth Justice Plan for 25-26. I believe, Andy, you're going to give a short introduction, and then we've got questions to go into. Thank you.
Helen's going to give the introduction, Chair, today. Thank you.
So the Youth Justice Offer in Doncaster continues to be effective in meeting the needs of children and families. There are a number of quotes throughout the Youth Justice Plan that evidence the good work that we do and how it has supported children and families. This year, we have launched a new antisocial behaviour virtual reality programme via our prevention service, EPIC. This innovative intervention works alongside existing programmes to provide support to help young people understand the impact of their behaviour. We have successfully achieved turnaround programme targets. This is the government's response to tackling crime and antisocial behaviour amongst those on the cusp of the criminal justice system. We're really proud of our performance, where of the 131 children engaged by the programme, only 0.7% offended or reoffended. We've noticed an increase in the prevalence of harmful sexual behaviour, particularly amongst boys, and we provide an in-house harmful sexual behaviour service to respond to this issue. We also have a seconded substance misuse support specialist into the Youth Justice Service, and it is anticipated that the alignment of substance misuse provision within the city will lead to a more consistent and effective offer to our children and young people. The Youth Justice Service is also trialling a buddy tag system which enables the whereabouts of young people to be tracked with their permission as a direct response to dealing with child criminal exploitation and the prevention and detection of crime. The Youth Justice Service is measured against a key range of performance indicators which demonstrates how the service is performing in relation to regional and national comparators. The key ones are to prevent and divert children from entering the criminal justice system, preventing offending for those who do, and reducing the use of custody where it is safe and appropriate to do so. In the past year, there has been some very strong performance in preventing and diverting children from the criminal justice system. 98% of children receiving a diversionary outcome did not reoffend. In relation to those children who were not diverted, the annualised reoffending rate was 32.5%, which is higher than our target, but is the same as the England average. The quarterly cohort demonstrates that the reoffending performance has reduced to 23.1%. We're also proud that over the past year, of the past 12 months, no child has received a custodial sentence, placing Doncaster as one of the highest performing areas in England and Wales. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We'll start off with questions in the absence of Councillor Jackson. First question, Councillor Reid, please.
On a daily basis, And what do you believe could be achieved better?
Thank you, Councillor Reid. So the hub, which is based in the Frenchgate Centre, is part of our universal offer to children. So basically that just means that any child can walk in at any time, have fun, but also have access to educative interventions and other support services. So we opened that as part of a pilot 3 years ago, and we're currently open on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays from 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon through to 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, depending on the children that are in there. And we averagely get 60 children every time that we're open, so it's really well used. And part of the focus of it is to reduce potential antisocial behaviour of young people in the Frenchgate Centre. Now, not every young person who goes into Frenchgate Centre causes antisocial behaviour, but sometimes the businesses do raise issues around young people being young people and causing issues that might impact upon their businesses. So the idea of the hub was to give young people a place to go within the Frenchgate Centre. So what we're looking to do is to expand the offer, not just to be open for children to walk in, but to have enough staff to be able to go out and engage children within the Frenchgate Centre and channel them towards the hub. Because what we tend to get is we do get some children who are involved in antisocial behaviour coming in, but a lot of the time they're children coming back from college or from schools and things like that, which is great. It's still a really safe place. So what we're aiming to do is to open up an additional day on a Monday and to have enough staff to be able to go out into the town centre and bring children in, as well as those children that walk in themselves. And we think that'll have a significant impact on youth ASB within the town centre. There are some funding plans to do this. We're expecting to be able to implement it after the summer. It's also worth pointing out, Councillor, that during school holidays we are open every day, so children can come in at any time. Those opening times that I mentioned are when children are in school. We also have an offer on a Tuesday where we have staff working down there, where it's not our normal offer, but any sort of older child who might need advice and guidance around sexual health or missing issues can just walk in.
Thank you, Andy.
I just ask a supplementary question. Is the hub purely drop-in, or are children actively diverted to it, if you know what I mean?
I do, Councillor Kidd. So the intention is for children just to walk in, but when the other part of the EPIC delivery, of course, is our work that we do in communities, in the communities where there's high incidence of ASB or youth crime. We're currently doing that in Wheatley. So what we tend to do is when we're in those communities, we highlight to the children that rather than hanging out on the streets or the parks where they are, they can access the hub. So we try and divert those children from the community delivery mechanism into the hub as well.
Thank you very much. Steve, you got a question? Councillor Cox?
I've knocked my thing off. Yeah, you've just mentioned Wheatley and engagement in the community. Where is it and what is it achieving? Because that's where I live. And it is interesting at best, shall we say, in places such as parks, Grove Gardens, for example. Is there any engagement with young people within that area to direct them in the right direction?
Yeah, so we've been in Wheatley now for about 8 weeks, and we're on the Mugger, the multi-use area, down towards the bottom of that Beckett Road Junction area. And we're getting 15, 16 children down for most sessions. And of course, over the summer holidays, we'll be running programmes every single day during the summer holidays in Wheatley. Part of that is the food and health programme that's delivered to all children in Doncaster in different areas, so we'll be delivering that. But we'll also be taking children from Wheatley out of the city to do different activities. And what we normally see, the normal EPIC deployment is 6 months, and we'll be in Wheatley for 6 months. And what we tend to see during that time is a gradual reduction in youth ASB for the age groups that span pretty much 11 to 15, 16. Once children start to get to 17, they're not as interested in the EPIC offer, if I'm being really truthful. You know, we tend to get children within that lower age range, but where we divert them, then they don't become the next generation of 17-year-olds who end up engaging in some of that more difficult to address antisocial behaviour.
One more question, Councillor Cox.
I mean, do you also work with other agencies such as police? Because, I mean, again, we have reported issues of antisocial behaviour in, and there's nothing that comes back from anyone. What we've seen over years is, yes, young people grow up, they move on, and then there's the next lot of young people that come and do the same as the ones that have been doing before, and we just go round in ever circles. And I mean, hopefully, you've only been doing it a few weeks, hopefully we can see something, but the engagement with other partners is crucial.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor Cox, and we do. So I have seconded police officers within my service. So we are not an enforcement organisation, but we do provide police intelligence in terms of young people that we think we might be at risk or being exploited. Normally where there's that really entrenched criminal or antisocial behaviour, it is linked to an exploitation issue. Not in all cases, but in most. We also link in with children's social care, the schools. A key part of the EPIC offer is our engagement with the schools, because the schools are the institutions which are there long term in those communities. So what we're trying to do is build relationships with community leaders, local shops even, schools, and ensure that they understand that sometimes young people's behaviour in those communities is just normal teenage behaviour, and we have to be more tolerant of that. Where it's an issue which is really affecting residents in terms of, you know, off-road bikes, I know is a big issue everywhere, or, you know, throwing stones or things like that, things that impact on people's lives, then we ensure that there's appropriate police intelligence regarding that. But the enforcement is undertaken by other organisations, which is DMBC's communities team and also the police.
Thank you. Next question, Councillor Booth. Would you like to ask that question?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. What governance and oversight mechanisms are in place via the Youth Justice Service Management Board? Please provide a brief overview. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Booth. So the Youth Justice Management Board is a statutory requirement that every area in the UK has to undertake. Our board has an independent chair, former police superintendent, Superintendent Neil Thomas, who was a Doncaster superintendent before he retired. And the board itself is comprised of senior leaders from the key partnership. So Rebecca is the Children's Social Care representative. We have a police superintendent. We have the head of Doncaster Probation Service. We also have a range of other colleagues who are what we would determine as stakeholders. So we have the head of the Communities and Thrive Service, Claire Scott, for example. We have public health officials. We have a domestic abuse specialist. We're very recently, in fact, at the next board, about to introduce an independent victim service onto the board as well. So the role of that board is to scrutinise the work that Helen and I are responsible for. So Helen writes a comprehensive performance report highlighting everything that's working well within the Youth Justice Service and everything where there is a challenge. We present that information to the board and they give us rigorous challenge around that. There is also, I should have said, of course, an elected member on that, which is Councillor Sue Farmer, as the lead member for Children's. And the purpose of the board is to provide that challenge, but it's also to set the strategic direction of the service. So once a year, the board meets for an away day, and during that away day, we review the previous year's performance, and then the board sets the targets based on that performance and any legislative or practice changes that are required for the service to meet the following year. So it's not Helen and I that set the targets in isolation, it's done by the board and we're accountable to the board for all that activity. In addition to those key partners that I met, youth justice in England is overseen overall by a arm's length management body of the Ministry of Justice, which is the Youth Justice Board. And the Youth Justice Board head of region also attends the management board, again, to ensure that the information that Helen and I provide into the board is rigorous and appropriate, but also to share issues of best practice. And most recently, the work that we've done around EPIC, which we mentioned around the hub and some of our community work, has been published nationally as an example of best practice on a website called Basecamp, which is what all youth justice services in the UK use to inform best practice.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much for that. Next question, I believe this could be a very, very long discussion, but a bit of an overview. Why has harmful sexual behaviour increased? And what additional steps have been taken as a result? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kidd. You're right, it's a multifaceted answer. It's not one thing. So I'll start with the easier aspects of it and then expand into where it gets more complicated. So the first thing is we think that there is increased reporting of harmful sexual behaviour due to a number of agendas which have occurred over the last 2 years, like the Me Too agenda. So people are more aware of issues relating to sexual harmful behaviour and have got more confidence coming forward to report it. So that in itself is a good thing. You know, the more reporting of it shows people more confident in public services' ability to respond to it. So I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing. The second thing is cultural, and it relates to how a lot of older young people, although in some cases younger young people, communicate when they enter into relationships through the sending of what they refer to as nudes. Intimate images of themselves, which are sent to one another, which is a fairly common practice for adults, but also for children. What children don't realise, however, is that when they send a naked image of themselves, they are committing an offence at the point they take and send the image, and the person receiving it is also committing an offence at the point that they receive it. Now, that is a societal issue. You've probably all heard about the issue of young people sending news, and indeed adults sending news, and sometimes this gets into the media. For that type of harmful sexual behaviour, we very much take an educative response, as do South Yorkshire Police. We don't look to charge and prosecute people. We look to raise young people's awareness of the risks and dangers and vulnerabilities they're placing themselves in by sending and receiving these types of images. However, there is actually a worrying increase in harmful sexual behaviour, particularly from young men. And there is no sensitive way to say this, Chair, so I'm just going to say it. And this relates very much to the pornography which we know that young men are watching online. So over the last 2 years, we've done a lot of research into the pornography habits of young men who come to our attention. And they're watching a lot of pornography which is determined as a category called amateur, which is, this is not pornography which is professionally produced. These are individuals who record themselves doing various acts and then upload them online. Data from the pornography companies themselves, particularly the largest one in the world, which is called Pornhub, indicate that 1,000 hours of this content are being uploaded in the world every day. There are only 40 moderators in the world to oversee that content. What that means is a lot of content is uploaded which has sexual violence towards women and girls. And this sexual violence takes the form of strangulation, spitting, hair pulling, slapping, that type of behaviour. So, everybody's sexual scripts, the things that inform people's sexuality, start to be formed during puberty and through your teenage years. So young men are looking online at what they think is normal pornography. It's not illegal pornography, you know, but they're seeing this culture of girls who are experiencing sexual violence, and that is leading them in their sexual and intimate relationships to be sexually violent. So to give you an indicator of the level of the problem, 2 years ago we had one young person who came through for a harmful sexual behaviour issue. In the last 12 months there's been 15, and another 40 who we are consulting on and providing support and advice and guidance to. Now, this is not a Doncaster specific issue. Excuse me. You may have seen in the last 2 weeks during the news, government departments have been highlighting the issue of young men accessing violent pornography as an impact on harmful sexual behaviour. So what we've been doing about this for the last year is we have a harmful sexual behaviour pathway led by the psychologist Dr. Jodie Howarth-Beale. It's one of the services that sits within my service area. So the psychology service does a range of things. It does cognitive testing for children, it does formulations, but it also runs the harmful sexual behaviour pathway. So the first thing we have to do is raise awareness amongst professionals about the risks that young men may present from looking at this pornography, because there's a whole raft of terms that we're just not aware of, that young people are using and where they're accessing these images. So we've been doing a huge amount to raise professional awareness around this issue, even though we know it's quite a difficult and hard-hitting issue, and to ensure that staff across, particularly staff in schools, particularly designated safeguarding leads, are aware that this is the type of issues that are happening, and to ensure that they understand the language of it, so if they see it on young people's phones, they know what to do. We have a helpline for the harmful sexual behaviour pathway that any person can ring. It's universal to get support and guidance. Our next step is to start giving this training to parents, because ultimately the only way that we're going to address this long term is if parents have got a clear line of sight onto what their children, particularly boys, are accessing in terms of their phones. So just to give you a context nationally, last year was the first year where the Childline, you know, the charity that young people can ring when they're worried about themselves or they're experiencing abuse. It was the first year where the number of calls were related predominantly to girls asking how to not engage in certain activities with their boyfriends rather than speaking about interfamilial abuse. So this is a major issue. Violence against women and girls is a national issue. You will have probably seen this reported in the media. We've got some really clear responses to it here in Doncaster. Our EPIC service has got a virtual reality programme for kids, school-aged children, around violence against women and girls relating to the issue of upskirting that we're out delivering in schools, you know, raising awareness. So this is a multifaceted and difficult problem. It's something that we're going to be working on for a long time. Should be some optimism nationally. So you may have seen that a lot of adult sites are going to be required by Ofcom to introduce proper age verification. Right now, the age verification for those sites is basically you click a button to say that you're 18. They're going to introduce the requirement to see identification or have an image of somebody to prove that they're over 18. That will slow the issue, but it will not solve it. So I expect this is an issue that I will be reporting to you for years to come if I'm truthful.
Thank you very much for that answer, and I think it's certainly something that we need to know. So thank you. The next question, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. In our acronym-rich area, FTE, first-time entrants, this has increased significantly during 23-24. Could you provide any reasons and any relevant corrective actions to combat this?
Yes, so our first-time entrant rate has been affected by the Crown Prosecution Service adhering rigorously to guidance that children appearing at court who are eligible for an out-of-court disposal, which is usually determined by our Youth Justice Service triage panel, are made subject to youth caution or a youth conditional caution. And this means that the child becomes a first-time entrant and subject to a formal criminal justice disposal. Previously, a child could be considered for a diversionary outcome by our triage panel, meaning they would receive the same offer, which is an assessment and intervention, as the other outcomes, YCC or YC, youth conditional caution or a youth caution, but without being criminalised or becoming a first-time entrant. What I need to stress is that the guidance uses the word should and not must. However, there's been, like I've said, rigorous application of that guidance by CPS. So this is not a problem specific to Doncaster, and it has been raised with the Youth Justice Board, our oversight body, and with the Crown Prosecution Service Youth Lead, as well as being escalated up to the Ministry of Justice. The advice from CPS was to make sure the case did not come to court in the first place. So to that end, we're working closely with police colleagues who are scrutinising every decision that's coming through at sergeant level to decide if cases should go to triage panel, our internal triage panel, or to CPS for charge. This should reduce the number of cases going to court and children being subject to the CPS stipulation. The difficulty happens where a child might give a no-comment interview, which can be linked to children who are being criminally exploited or those with speech, language and communication needs, which means in terms of exploitation, children don't want to admit to anything because they fear reprisals for those who are exploiting them. For those children with speech, language and communication needs, they may not understand what is being asked. And without an admission of guilt, police officers will send the case to CPS for a charging decision, which then results in this outcome problem that I've outlined. Work has also been undertaken with solicitors to ensure they are aware of the full range of options for children they represent and the impact of certain outcomes for children. I think it's worth pointing out that historically we have had very low first-time entrant rates in Doncaster, and we're now at similar levels to other areas across Yorkshire and in other youth justice services, hence the rate does look particularly stark. We have successfully liaised on individual case level basis with the Crown Prosecution Service to have decisions overturned, but this is only in a small minority of cases.
Thank you, Ellen. Had a potential supplementary, but you've answered it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next two questions, Councillor Knight, you're going to sort of take those, aren't you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at, obviously, thinking back on the prevention of reoffending and looking at things maybe year on year over the past maybe 5 years or more, and looking at how that sort of compares to where we're at today, but also in this, of the number of children within the reoffending cohort, of these, how many have had contact with the Doncaster Youth Justice System, but of those, have they successfully engaged with the service? It's one thing coming to the service, and are they successful when they do come to see you?
Thank you, Councillor Knight. So I'll take those as individual parts of the question. So the first and easiest one to answer is, are all children within the cohort open to the Youth Offending Service? The simple answer is no. So there are children who receive outcomes that don't come to the attention to the Youth Offending Service, so particularly traffic violation outcomes or fixed penalty notices. So we never know who those children are. So you can receive a fixed penalty notice or a traffic-based outcome that brings you, in terms of the police national computer statistics, into the Youth Offending Services cohort, but they're never open to us. They're never referred to us because the intervention is finished there. You know, it's a fine. So we do end up with those, but they are a small percentage of the cohort. The vast majority of children we work directly with. And all children have engaged with us. We don't get children who don't engage. We have children whose engagement is greater or lesser than others, but children becoming open to us who we never see, that never happens. It certainly hasn't happened in the last 5 years. So across the course of the last 5 years, what we've seen, and what we've seen locally as well as nationally, is a massive change in where the children sit within the cohort. So if you were to go back 5 years ago, you would have hundreds of children open on statutory youth justice orders. Over time, the legislative landscape has changed, and indeed the practice understanding of what is effective with children has changed. And we've diverted more and more children away from statutory outcomes to diversionary outcomes, where they get exactly the same offer, they get the same offer of support, and that offer of support in Doncaster is extensive. So if you're a child in Doncaster and you come into the potentially youth offending service, you can receive any of these interventions, regardless of what level of outcome you've got. You can get a dyslexia screening, a speech, language and communication assessment and intervention, psychological formulation, cognitive behaviour therapy, dialectical behaviour therapy, intervention for harmful sexual behaviours, direct careers advice from qualified careers professionals, non-invasive STI screening and also substance misuse intervention and support, young people's counselling, systemic family psychotherapy. So that is a suite of interventions which can meet not every single child's needs, but the vast majority of children's needs in terms of what they present within the criminal justice system. So over time, the children don't change, but where they sit within the system changes. So we've diverted more and we're more and more effective at preventing offending for those. Helen's already told you today about the success of turnaround. 0.7% of 131 children. What that relates to in real terms is one child who reoffended out of 131. Now, that's massively successful. And that's because if you intervene early in a child's offending history, if you get in there identify the problems, address the needs really, really quickly before it becomes entrenched, you've got a far greater chance of preventing them from reoffending in the future. Now, what that leads to, of course, on the other side, is a much smaller cohort of children who are on criminal justice orders whose needs are much more difficult to meet. Within that cohort, we have a group of children who are looked after by the local authority and who are sometimes, for a variety of different reasons, often relating to their actual needs, not in terms of criminal justice, but their care needs, are placed outside of the city. And this can be in any other city in the UK. Now, how youth justice works in Britain is, in England and Wales, it's different in Scotland, is that if a child is placed outside of your locality, one of your children, then you retain overall responsibility for the child's case. But the other local authority provides what's called a caretaking service. They do the day-to-day intervention. We do the same for children who are placed in the city of Doncaster. So what that means is we aren't always able to implement our practice model and our offer with those children who are placed out of city. And that sometimes leads to those children reoffending. Now, this year, the YOS Management Board has identified that and said, well, it's okay that you've been saying that for some time, but that's not making any changes, is it? And that's a fair challenge to us. So we've repurposed a small element of our budget so where children are placed out of city and the intervention that they would have received in Doncaster isn't available to them in the city where they are residing, then we will commission that locally where it's possible to do so. So I suppose to answer your question, all children get engaged, and we are very good at that. I've got to say my staff are really strong in relationship-based practice. They know how to get alongside families and work with children and create relationships with children. And throughout the plan, you will have seen direct quotes, many, many, many direct quotes from children and their parents about our work and the effectiveness of our work. And that's the best measure of what we do, rather than the numbers. What matters is how children and their families experience that service. And those quotes are just direct quotes from them. So we're good at getting alongside. The cohort has changed. More children are being diverted much, much earlier, leading to a much more complicated but smaller cohort of children on orders. And where we don't affect change, quite often it is linked to children who are placed out of city. Hopefully what we've trying to do around the budget will have some impact on that. There will always be children who reoffend. We can't stop that. What we aim for when they are reoffending is that the reoffending is less a seriousness than what brought them into the system. So we make progress over time. Ultimately, our main aim is to try and keep children safe and communities safe. But for a very small number of children, we don't always achieve that.
Yeah, that's been very comprehensive, and thank you for everything you've just gone through there. And it's very clear that that connection sometimes for that age group, maybe the 7 to 10-year-olds, which is probably that most area when they're wanting to get away from home and be experiment elsewhere with things they do, obviously reflects in the behaviours and what happens out on the street and where they end up with you. And similarly, that connection which you raised just now was the one between the children and the parents, or carers, or whoever is involved with that child. That connection is also very important to maintain and look after, but also to see that the efforts that you're putting in and seeing the results at the end of the day, yes, you can't get 100% success at the end of the day, but if you can achieve 80 or 90% success and getting a child to go on the straight and narrow rather than continuing down a road that's the wrong road, I'm pleased to see that, we're aiming in the right direction. And I do feel so pleased, as I just said, about that connections with the 7 to 10-year-olds, more especially with the parents involved as well, where you possibly can. I know it's not always easy. I see it from my side in a different angle. But anyway, thank you all for what you do.
I think my next question sort of follows on for that. To some extent, it was clarification. Those who are not diverted, the reoffending rate is 32.5. Is that correct? I'm interpreting that correctly. Can you just reiterate why are some not diverted? Thank you.
So we try and divert every single child at the point that they present, and we do for most of them, unless the offence is of subsequent seriousness that they can't be diverted. So if a child commits an offence which is of a certain gravity score, it's very difficult for us to say it's safe to divert that child. There has to be a substantive outcome. Also, we take the victim's wishes into consideration. You know, so if a victim has been really seriously harmed, it's probably not appropriate to divert a child at that point. There probably needs to be some level of professional sanction. And that decision is not just taken by us, that's taken in partnership with South Yorkshire Police. And I have to say, South Yorkshire Police are an excellent force in terms of their child-focused approach to children. But there are times when it's just not appropriate. Likewise, if we can't support change for a child who's been diverted and they reoffend again, then the likelihood is that they need a more intensive approach from us in order to effect change. So every child gets the opportunity for diversion, but the seriousness of the offence or more frequent reoffending sometimes means that needs to progress through court and achieve a different outcome.
Thank you. Yes, I understand now. So if the offence is so serious that they are maybe going to a custodial sentence, but is there at some point some sort of diversionary activities available to them?
Almost every child, not every child, but almost every child who receives a court outcome has had at least one diversionary outcome prior to that. So occasionally we do get children who've never reoffended, who just do something incredibly serious. They've not even been open to services. That does happen sometimes, although that is rare. So most of the time it's children who've had a diversionary outcome maybe a year before, haven't reoffended for a year, and then do something much more serious, and diversion is no longer appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Reid for the next question.
Thanks, Chair. Possibly a very long answer, so a focus really. How is the service responding to risks around child criminal exploitation, which is obviously a very wide-ranging subject?
Thank you, Councillor Reid. So the CE, the child exploitation, is one of my services. It's not part of the youth offending service, but it is within my spectrum of services. So it's a multifaceted response, and it's a partnership response. So it's all the work around CE is undertaken in partnership between South Yorkshire Police, Children's Social Care, the CE team itself, the Youth Justice team, education partners, probation partners. It's not a one agency response to this issue. So first of all, every local authority in the country is required to have a MACE, a multi-agency child exploitation panel. That uses an established methodology, a scoring methodology, which identifies what level of risk children are at from exploitation based on a range of factors, including the child's individual circumstances, assess learning needs, police intelligence relating to organised crime groups in that area and that child's activity, and their antecedent history. The panel meets every week. Children are reviewed and then given a status in terms of green, amber or red. Now, children who are green at that point are diverted to receive intervention anyway. It's not that they don't get intervention, but they don't become open to MACE because there isn't substantially enough evidence of exploitation to have them registered there. Amber children and red children are reviewed frequently and they're allocated a CE worker. Quite not in every case, but in most cases, in 95% of cases actually, there is also a social worker that is working with that child. That social worker will be supporting that child at child in need level or at child protection level. The social worker is responsible for the child's care safety plan. So they're overseeing the plan. The CE worker is there to provide additional work as identified by the social worker and the other partners to support to divert the child away from CE. So that is a really important relationship. The social worker is the lead professional in that. The CE worker does direct work with the child and continues to support at MACE. Now, while all that's going on, the police are also undertaking what we refer to as disruption activity. This is targeted intelligence-based activity to interfere and disrupt the activities of the organised crime groups in the area. Organised crime groups themselves are mapped by the local authority and the police in partnership once there is enough substantial evidence to highlight that they are in fact an organised crime group and not individuals acting on their own. So we continue, we don't stop with child. If a child's at risk of exploitation, we continue working with them indefinitely, that would just go on whilst the police are trying to disrupt the organised crime groups. And the police are very successful at disrupting organised crime groups in Doncaster. But like everywhere else in the UK, there's always going to be more. That's the nature of it. But I would also highlight that exploitation in Doncaster is not just related to child criminal exploitation, there's also child sexual exploitation. It's of lesser prevalence and it's normally down to individuals rather than organised gangs. But the CE team works with children, whether it's child criminal or child sexual exploitation. Then there's a whole other raft of work that is done by other teams in the council relating to things like licensing, ensuring that taxi drivers are well equipped to understand when, if a child's travelling on their own or with an individual that's not their parent, that they might be at risk of child sexual exploitation. With hotels, if somebody turns up at a hotel with somebody who isn't their parent. So the response to this isn't just my service or children's social care or the police, it's all the services. It's education colleagues in terms of raising awareness throughout the city. And EPIC, one of the teams that we've mentioned here already, one of my teams, we've got a dedicated virtual reality training program for professionals to make them aware of the risks and issues that might impact on a child in terms of exploitation. So it's a massive, multifaceted piece of work which is constantly ongoing. It covers many teams within the council and partnership teams. And in fact, it can't be done by one service on its own. It is a full multi-agency partnership response.
Thorough answer, Andy. Thanks. I'd like to find out a bit more about the green, amber, red process. Would that be you that I could talk to?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Councillor Knight, have you got a question? Do you want to ask? Yeah.
Sorry to intrude on that one. I apologise for coming in a bit late there on that one. We're referring to the children for referrals or those that are reoffending, but also you raised the point of the contact between the social workers and particular children at a certain case, but quite so often I see one or two of the failings can be where the continuous changes of social workers with a particular child, the child loses interest, loses heart, and then comes back and sort of says, well, why am I wasting my time? Because the social worker I had for 6 weeks, I had another one for a year, you know, they feel let down in that on this. I'm not saying that the social worker side is, I don't think it's part of your immediate jurisdiction, but from a child's point of view, that they can quite often feel very let down that one week they've got one person, another week they've got a different person. I don't know why there's continuous changes. They don't follow the child's needs from start to finish, as you might say. I'll leave that with you just to bear as a thought anyway, if it isn't.
So social work is my jurisdiction in terms of where we sit. I think Doncaster, and it is a complicated situation because a child's childhood is a long childhood, isn't it? And social workers are like many other people where they do have career progression and they move and they grow and they develop. Doncaster has had an issue historically with workforce stability. When I came to Doncaster 2.5 years ago, we had 48 social work vacancies. And we got a number of agency staff that were turning over. I'm really proud to say that over the last 2 years, I think I currently have 4 social work vacancies. I do still have agency social workers working to create extra capacity to support our ASYEs. And actually, we think the turnover of social workers has slowed down. But that will take time because sometimes what we hear is the lived experience of when that wasn't working well. So what we know now is we've got much better workforce stability, which is great. We've got experienced social workers that are wanting to come and work in Doncaster as well, which is brilliant. But the beauty of the model as well that Andy talks about is very much about what we want to do around families first, which is sometimes it isn't always the social worker has the continuous relationship. Sometimes they step in and out when there's crisis or when there's need. The people that often are continuous are the people like the youth worker from, it's a very much youth worker model of delivery, high intensity, seeing kids every week. Making sure there's a connection, or it might be their early help worker, or it might be the person in school that's their pastoral lead. So what we're trying to do is work through the relationships, create connection, and make sure that young people understand why social workers may come and go, and that sometimes that might not be a bad thing, but that where children need continuity of relationship, we've got workforce stability that offers that. So I'm hoping the picture for the future will be a different experience for children of Doncaster.
Rebecca, thank you for that. That's very important because, again, as I said, children need to feel that they're secure in the environment as well as the people that they're in contact with. And in the past, they felt a little bit left out or let down. And I'm pleased to hear what you've just said about the situation from 2.5 years ago when you joined Doncaster City Council as is now, that the position is that there's more security within that area, as you might say. No, thank you for the update on that entirely.
Councillor Reid, did I cut across you there? Sorry, were you about to ask another question?
No, I was going.
Councillor Booth, got a question from you.
I have. How is the service supporting vulnerable groups, including local authority children and special educational needs children?
So we have a strong intervention offer. Andy's already mentioned, I think I have as well, about speech and language therapists who undertake assessments. Those assessments inform recommendations to schools, training providers, colleges for how best to work with the young people that have been assessed. And that offer is not just at statutory stage, that's also offered to children at the prevention stage as well. We have dyslexia screening, that's offered by our in-house education coordinator, who also works closely with the speech and language therapist to support children and families in terms of ensuring appropriate education provision is in place and in completing education, health and care plans paperwork so that children can be assessed for additional support, because sometimes families find it difficult to navigate that process. We also have a careers team who offer bespoke service to our children and young people, taking full account of their learning needs and ensuring employers, training providers, etc. are aware of how best to support those young people. In terms of looked after children, via our triage panel, we have an independent chair who ensures that we're not unnecessarily criminalising looked after children by offering diversion disposals where appropriate. So, for example, if a child in a children's home commits an offence of criminal damage, which may not necessarily result in the police becoming involved in a familial home, then we ensure that where we can, we offer that diversionary outcome so we're not criminalising looked after children. Being in care or care experienced is, as you will know, a recognised protected characteristic within the City of Doncaster Council. And measures are in place to ensure such things as guaranteed interviews for this group. And we currently have a care experienced young person undertaking work within our service area. We've got an ambitious target with our youth justice plan of bringing looked after children in line with the general 10 to 17 population who live in familial homes in terms of outcomes. It is, like I say, an ambitious target so we have 0.4% of the 10 to 17 general population receiving a substantive outcome in terms of offending, but for looked after children it is 2%, so we are trying our best to align that in terms of the work that we do.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just ask, before you go on to your next question, Councillor Booth, I know in previous years we've talked a lot about speech and language difficulties that children. I know you brought in speech and language support to the system, but are we still experiencing children that have slipped through the net to some extent at schools? Because you are sort of dealing with things that are quite outside of your specific service, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. So often we are dealing with young people who may have missed huge gaps in their school career through exclusion or not being in education full time. And it's those children who are in the older end of the spectrum that we are picking up and having to work with those needs.
Thank you. Councillor Booth. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cox, you've got a question on that.
Thank you, Jay. I'm trying to keep quiet. I don't know, it's strange for me. But anyway, when we're talking about children with additional needs that are coming towards criminality, we do know that, going back to social workers, that some young people will speak to or engage better with a male or a female social worker. I know that it has been before where somebody has been within the process and said, I cannot work with this gender of person. That gender of person has kept going and going and going when they can't and won't engage. Has that changed? Would that be something that's moving forward now because it hasn't worked in the past? And it's ended up where that person has then been dropped because they're not engaging, but they're telling you why they're not engaging.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. It hasn't been a major issue for us in the Youth Justice Service, but we do have a staff team of different genders and different ages. So we would try and match wherever possible. If a child expressed a specific preference for a man or a woman or somebody who differently gendered themselves at a certain age, we would try and accommodate that. But it hasn't, as far as I'm aware, been a major issue for us, Helen, in the last year.
No, but I think if a child was vocalising that they were unhappy with an arrangement or it wasn't working for them, and we would endeavour to ensure there was a change of worker because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and it's not working, then you need to try something different.
And it's all about engagement, isn't it? If the young people, if nobody, it doesn't matter how old they are, if they don't engage, you can't do anything about it. So listening to their voice is absolutely critical. And I know that it's happened, and I just hope that you can give me the guarantee that it doesn't happen anymore.
Thank you. Oh.
Yeah, absolutely, councillors. I mean, I totally agree, and I would again say, you know, it is worth just reading the appendices of the Youth Justice Plan this year to see the feedback from children and families. I think in the main we get it right in terms of engagement, but we can always do better. But as Helen says, if we do encounter that issue, I can give you assurance that we would consider it and change that child's worker where it's appropriate to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Booth, I think last question we've got.
Thank you, Chair. How are young people and families involved in co-producing services?
Thank you, Councillor. So the service, as you know, and Andy's just mentioned again, obtains formal feedback. That's at the end of their order or disposal with us, and that's from children and families, and you will have seen that throughout the Youth Justice Plan. We also take feedback from groups of young people by way of forums and a recently established girls group looking at how girls feel we can better meet their needs. As a result of what young people have told us, we created Young Persons Counsellor Post. And we also ask young people for feedback on some of our documentation, for example, intervention plans, and we've actually modified our plans based on what young people have fed back to us. If we are recruiting staff to the team, we use a young persons panel of either young people who have recently closed to us or open, who want to participate, who we feel will be useful to be part of that interview process so they can give a view as to whether they feel a candidate will be suitable for the post. And in terms of families, our systemic family therapy team obtain feedback on the efficacy of their service. They provide with families by way of a scoring tool, which measures where the families are at the beginning and then how they feel that the service has helped them at the end of that intervention.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, we'll go to... Thank you very much, everybody, for with your questions that you brought today, and thank you very much for the answers. We'll go to recommendation, which is the paragraph 10 of the report on page 2. The committee has asked to give consideration to the Youth Justice Plan and to prior support it to being presented to Cabinet and full Council. Is this agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, so we're now moving on to agenda item number 6, which is the statement of licensing policy. David Smith, thank you very much for attending, and Kelly, would a very quick overview, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the Licensing Act 2003 requires a licensing authority to review and determine its statement of licensing policy every 5 years. The revised policy has been the subject of a statutory consultation which sought the views of responsible authorities, the licensed trade, legal representatives, elected members and the wider public. The revised policy remains largely unchanged from the current version. Details of the changes made before and following the consultation are documented within the report. And once approved by full council, the revised policy will take effect from the 7th of January 2026. Members of this committee are asked to note and consider the revised policy and to recommend it moves to the next step in the adoption process, which is the licensing committee on the 24th of September, before final approval at council on the 20th of November. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you just mentioned that there was a few changes from the previous policy, but Councillor Reid, do you want to just ask your question?
Just jumping ahead slightly to question 2, there's a little thing in brackets that says may be covered in the first response. So if it could be, then we can get it all into one, David. Is that okay? Could you provide an outline on the key changes comparing the strategy to the previous one, last adopted in January 2021, and question 2, reforms to formal consultation? Thank you.
Thank you. So in regards to your first question, outline of the key changes comparing this strategy to the previous one, which was adopted in 2021. If I can draw your attention to Appendix C, which is page 125 of your report, that shows what those changes are. It gives a brief description of each of those changes and the location of where they are. And also Appendix B, which is the revised policy, which is page 83 of your bundle. Shows the track changes. It shows the current policy with track changes made, which shows all the existing changes as well in red. I'll take you through those in a second as well. I'll just jump on to question 2. And formal consultation, yeah, I'll cover that as well. Thank you. So, Appendix C, describing the changes. So it's basically largely administrative changes. Obviously the council has changed from Doncaster Council to City of Doncaster Council, so that's been updated. Wherever there's any spelling errors, layout changes, sequential paragraph numbering, these have been updated. As I say, administrative changes. Period dates to reflect when the new policy will be in effect have been updated. The most significant changes are the next 2, which is the inclusion of the Ask for Angela and the WAVE initiative. These are 2 public safety initiatives which were not necessarily not around at the time the policy was last reviewed 5 years ago, but certainly not as prominent as they are today. So they're included in the policy to give applicants and licence holders some advice around best practice. There's been some administrative changes. Again, the last policy included information around COVID-19, which is obviously not as prevalent as it was at that time. So that's been updated. Some paragraphs have been expanded just to give some better guidance to applicants, and the other changes are as a result of the consultation, which I'll take you to. So Appendix A, we had 3 responses received from the consultation. The first one was from planning. They suggested some amendments to the policy in regards to planning permissions to provide clarity and update wording. They suggested the inclusion of a website address where applicants can check if they require any planning permission, and both of those were taken on board and added to the policy. The second response was from the Safeguarding Children Partnership, who basically said that they support the changes and offered no further amendments. The last one we got was from Bawtry Town Council, which supported the content of the revised policy, and they asked the question around cumulative impact, which is not a matter for this policy, but is something which is going to be consulted on next year. So yeah, largely administrative changes. Thank you.
Thank you, David. No supplementaries, Chair.
Councillor Cox, I noticed you had a question.
Thank you. Is this only for licence holders of selling alcohol? I mean, sorry, but I thought the licensing I mean, we've been down and had these conversations before. Is there any involvement from taxi drivers in any of this, or is it just not applicable?
Yeah, this policy is strictly for the Licensing Act 2003, which is the licensing of premises and persons for regulated activities, which is sale of alcohol, late night refreshment, recorded music, live music. There's no taxi implications in this policy.
When does that come back? When is that going to be revisited?
That is, it has been redrafted, the policy. It is waiting a consultation, and it will go through the licensing committee for approval once that consultation has carried out. I don't have a date at this time.
I remember in the past we have discussed the gambling policy, haven't we? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
If I may, could I just ask that that comes back to this committee, the taxi one?
I can take that request away. I'm not sure it's in my power to say yes or no. There is a procedure for approval and it's approved by a licensing committee. I'm not sure it comes to this committee as normal. So it's not something I can answer now, but I can take that away.
I can chase that up for you, Steve. Yeah, okay.
Just indulge me slightly. It does matter to everybody, and it's the safeguarding of children and young people as well that is mentioned in many, many reports. There's also many of the drivers and people within the authority that have concerns over out of area plates, which we know they're not breaking any rules. We know, I met with Wolverhampton. Now, we are aware of that, and I would just like it to come to scrutiny. Just
yeah, well, I'll definitely take it up outside of this meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So we've got a question from Councillor Knight.
Please, Chair. Again, licensing regulations, what pathway or opportunity is there in place for the stakeholders to provide further input after the policy has been agreed? What is in place to react to short and long-term changes within this remit?
Thank you, Councillor. So if I just read this quote from the executive summary section of the policy document, it states, Section 5 of the Licensing Act 2003 requires the licensing authority to prepare a statement of its licensing policy that is proposed to apply in exercising its functions. The policy must be reviewed at least every 5 years, but may be reviewed within that period and revised as appropriate. So there is opportunity for revisions within that 5-year period.
Thank you for that, reading that forward to us, David. It's just that there was a couple of instances whereby response might have been appreciated sooner rather than later in policy views to long term.
Okay, thank you. Go on to the next question, which I'm actually asking on behalf of Councillor Reid. Cumulative impact assessment. What areas, if any, have been designated under a CIA? If none, why has the Council chosen not to apply any cumulative impact zones, despite having the framework to do so? Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, there are cumulative impact areas in place in Doncaster, and I would refer you to Annex 2, which is page 123 of your bundle, which shows a summary of the cumulative impact areas which are in place. There are 2 maps there which highlight where those areas are covered. Although referred to in this policy, as I mentioned before, the cumulative impact areas aren't subject to the consultation or this policy amendment. That is a separate document. This document's every 5 years. The cumulative impact is every 3, so they sort of overlap and interchange. That's currently up for, it will be up for review next year, but there is cumulative impact areas in place. It covers quite a significant part of Doncaster.
Yes, Councillor Cox.
Thank you. I was on the committee thing when the Bawtry one were implemented, and I believe I seconded it. Now, it's interesting now when we see that there's a lot of CCTV that's gone up in Bawtry. Is there any enforcement of any actions towards licence holders within Bawtry?
CCTV in Butch Town Centre wouldn't be anything licensing related. It largely police or criminal. If we receive complaints, they'll be investigated, certainly. The cumulative impact assessment and the cumulative impact policy, the idea is it's where the authority believes that the area has reached saturation point, or there are issues in that area which would be made worse by licensed premises. It's not necessarily alcohol, it could be late night refreshments, it could be health related. So the onus there is on applicants for new premise licence applications. They start at a position where the application will be refused, and it's for them to prove that they won't add to that impact. And the granting of some licences will actually improve the area and make it better. So it's not an automatic, you will not be given a licence, it's a tell us why you should. So it flips the onus. But yeah, any complaints, any issues, anything that's brought before the licensing committee, if it's at a premises that is within the cumulative impact area, that is brought to the committee's attention, and they can apply whatever weight, additional weight to that as they choose.
Thank you very much. Councillor Knight, got a question? Or even possibly two?
Please, Chair. Sorry. If I now refer back to safeguarding, there is reference to protecting children in harm within the objectives, but can you expand on how all the safeguarding is covered and provide assurance that this is reflected across all areas of the policy?
Thank you. So the protection of children from harm is one of the 4 statutory objectives which must be addressed when licensing functions are undertaken. It is one of the 4 cornerstones of the Act. It is equally important as the other 3. Doncaster Safeguarding Children Partnership are also a responsible authority under the Act, which means that they are a consultee on all applications for premises licences and club premises certificates, and are able to make representations. Each application is considered on its own merits, and where required, tailor-made conditions can be volunteered by the applicant through discussion with responsible authorities, or they can be imposed by a committee where representations are received. So they can be tailor-made to address any specific issues with certain premises, certain areas. But to answer the question, one of the 4 main objectives is the protection of children from harm, and is taken extremely seriously.
Appreciated, David, and I appreciate that each circumstance, each licensed premise has its own individual requirements and designs or whatever. So, as you said, when it comes round to looking at them, I'm pleased you've reiterated to me that each is given its own considerations. That's the gap that I was struggling with, that different have different needs, and that is ensuring that it's being covered, to be honest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions before we move to the recommendations? Again, thank you very much for your questions and thank you for your answers. Recommendations, paragraph 5 of the report, page 75. The committee is asked to note the reviewed statement of policy and the consultation responses and support it going forward to full council for adoption. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So item 6 is the overview and scrutiny work plan. Caroline, did you particularly want to say anything at this stage? Yeah.
So the work plan came to the last meeting, which you agreed it then. We've just started rolling out all the meetings now. But just as an update, the community safety strategy has actually been delayed, so the dates that's shown on the plan will change in due course. This is still being arranged, so we'll let you know. And also for the minutes, I'll note the request for the addition of the licensing taxi item to come back, and we'll respond back to that at the next meeting.
Thank you. And we've also got the suggestion from a member of the public. I mean, are people in support of that as looking at the reserves? Yeah. Okay. Yes, Steve?
Would that not be part of the budget when we're looking at budget?
I think it probably will be, yes. Yeah, we'll take it back to the chair and everything and discuss the best way to deal with it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Sorry, I'm just referring to the forward plan. I think most of the things in there are either going to, so tenancy strategy and agreement, that's going to regen and housing. Q1 finance will come in September, and we've looked at youth justice plan today, and there's nothing else in the forward plan, so that's all there. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, thank you very much, everybody, and I'll close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.